At Thanksgiving dinner, my daughter-in-law handed me a dirty mop in front of 8 guests and told me to eat crumbs off the floor like the dog you are. Then my only son, the child I raised alone for 20 years after his father died, stood beside her and said I should be grateful they let me live in my own house, rent-free. That night I discovered I'd spent $87,000 of my retirement savings financing their luxury lifestyle while being treated like their unpaid maid. The November evening air felt frigid against my tear-stained face as I sat alone on the patio after everyone had gone to bed. My name is Elena Alvarez. I'm 65 years old, and 3 years ago my beloved husband Miguel passed away after 42 years of marriage. Tonight, for the first time, I finally understood that I had also lost my son. The grand house around me, a beautiful 4-bedroom Spanish colonial in San Diego's Kensington neighborhood, had been my home for 30 years. Miguel and I had purchased it when real estate prices were reasonable, paid off the mortgage through decades of hard work, and lovingly maintained every inch. It was supposed to be our forever home where we'd grow old watching the sunset over the garden we'd planted together. Now it felt like a gilded prison. Inside, my son Ethan Rodriguez slept peacefully beside his wife Isabella in the master bedroom, my bedroom where Miguel and I had once slept. I had been relegated to the smallest guest room next to the laundry area 3 years ago when they temporarily moved in after Miguel's funeral. "Mom, I can't bear the thought of you being alone right now." Ethan had said, his eyes red from crying at his father's funeral. "Let us stay with you until you're back on your feet." I'd been so grateful for his concern then, so blind. As I sat shivering in the darkness, replaying the humiliation of the evening's events, I knew something had irreversibly broken. The invisible threads that had kept me tethered to this house, to the illusion that we were still a family, had finally snapped. Tomorrow I would be gone. 3 years earlier, the day after we buried Miguel, I sat across from our financial advisor Richard Weinstein in his downtown office. I wore the black dress Miguel had always loved, still numb with grief. "Elena, I want you to know Miguel planned everything meticulously," Richard said gently. "Between his life insurance, your joint savings, and your pension from the school district, you have approximately $367,000 in liquid assets, plus the house, which is fully paid off and worth about $1.2 million in today's market." I nodded, the numbers washing over me without meaning. Miguel had always handled our finances, though he made sure I understood everything. He'd been so careful, so responsible. "That should allow you to maintain your lifestyle comfortably for the rest of your life, assuming normal market returns and typical expenses," Richard continued. "Miguel wanted to make sure you'd never have to worry." Tears filled my eyes. Even in death, my husband was taking care of me. "There's one more thing," Richard added, sliding a sealed envelope across the desk. "Miguel asked me to give you this privately." Later that night, alone in our bedroom, I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Mi amor, the letter began in Miguel's distinctive handwriting. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm so sorry to have left you. You were the love of my life, Elena, from the moment I saw you teaching those kindergartners how to finger paint with such patience and joy. 42 years wasn't enough time with you. I've tried to make sure you'll be taken care of financially. Richard will explain everything, but here is my most important advice. Keep your financial independence. Remember my mother's situation, how my brothers took advantage after my father died. I don't want that for you. Ethan loves you, but sometimes love makes people blind to their own actions. Keep your own bank accounts. Don't put his name on the house. Help him when he truly needs it, but don't let anyone, even our son, make you feel less than the extraordinary woman you are. Live, Elena. Travel to Barcelona like we always planned. Take those painting classes. Make new friends. Find joy again. Te amo por siempre, Miguel." I clutched the letter to my chest, sobbing until I had no tears left. I didn't understand his warnings then. Miguel had always been cautious, perhaps overly so. Ethan was our precious boy, our only child after 3 miscarriages. He would never take advantage of me. How wrong I was. The changes were gradual, almost imperceptible at first. 2 weeks after the funeral, Ethan and Isabella moved in temporarily to help me adjust to life without Miguel. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone right now," Ethan insisted, his arm around Isabella. "We can stay in the guest room until you're feeling better." Isabella nodded sympathetically. "Plus, we can save on rent while we look for our own place. The housing market is just so expensive right now." I was grateful for the company. The house felt too empty, too quiet without Miguel's booming laugh and constant tinkering with his projects. Having Ethan home reminded me of when he was growing up. The patter of feet in the hallway, the sounds of life filling the rooms. Within a month, they had moved from the guest room to the master bedroom. "Mom, that mattress is so much better for my back," Ethan explained. "And the room is bigger. You don't need all that space for just yourself, right? The guest room is cozier." I agreed because it seemed reasonable, because I didn't want to be difficult, because the grief was still so raw that I couldn't bear the thought of conflict. By the 3-month mark, Isabella had redecorated the living room, replacing Miguel's beloved leather recliner with a sleek modern sectional that hurt my back. My colorful Mexican pottery collection was boxed up and stored in the garage, replaced by minimalist decor from expensive boutiques. "This look is more current," Isabella explained when I questioned the changes. "Those folk art pieces make the house look dated. We need to think about resale value." "Resale, but I'm not selling the house," I said, confused. "Of course not now, Mom," Ethan quickly interjected. "But eventually you might want something smaller. It's just smart thinking." 6 months in, they were still looking for their own place, though the search seemed half-hearted at best. Isabella had quit her marketing job to pursue her passion for interior design, though her only client seemed to be my house, which continued to transform into something unrecognizable. Ethan's sales job at a pharmaceutical company kept him busy with frequent travel. When he was home, he spent most evenings out with Isabella or locked in his home office playing video games, a hobby that seemed to consume an increasing portion of his income based on the packages that arrived weekly. I found myself cooking their meals, doing their laundry, and cleaning up after them, not because they asked directly, but because the tasks simply wouldn't get done otherwise. The one time I left dishes in the sink as an experiment, Isabella made a comment about clutter affecting her creative energy. Then came the financial requests. "Mom, the transmission in my car died," Ethan said one evening, looking sheepish. "The repair is $3,200 and it's really tight this month with Isabella between jobs. Could you help us out just until my commission check comes in next month?" Of course I helped. And when the roof needed repairs after a storm, $700 to $800, and when Isabella wanted to launch her design business website, $4,500 for professional photography and web design. And when they wanted to take a much-needed vacation to Cabo San Lucas, $600 for an all-inclusive resort. Each time I transferred money from my savings account without question. Each time the promised repayment never materialized. Each time the explanation was different but equally convincing. The commission structure changed at work. We had unexpected expenses come up. "Next month for sure, Mom, things are just tight right now." I didn't track the total. I didn't want to seem like I was counting or keeping score. They were family after all, and Miguel and I had always said our money would ultimately be Ethan's inheritance anyway. I was just advancing it when he needed it. But something else was happening simultaneously, something more insidious than the financial drain. My role in my own home was changing. I was no longer the matriarch, the respected elder, the owner of the space. I had become the help. "Elena, could you please wash these blouses by hand? The delicate cycle in the machine just isn't gentle enough," Isabella called out, dropping an armful of silk garments on the kitchen table where I was having my morning coffee. "I have my book club this morning," I reminded her. "I can do it when I get back." Isabella's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh, well, I need the cream blouse for my lunch meeting with a potential client. It's really important." I sighed and picked up the blouses. My book club, the one social activity I had maintained after Miguel's death, could wait. Again. "Thank you, Elena." Isabella never called me Mom or even Mrs. Rodriguez. Just Elena, as if I were a slightly familiar acquaintance rather than family. "Oh, and we're having some friends over for dinner tonight. Nothing fancy, just 6 people. Could you make that paella everyone loved at Christmas?" This was Isabella's pattern. Nothing fancy inevitably meant elaborate preparations that would keep me in the kitchen all day. The paella recipe was Miguel's grandmother's, requiring hours of careful preparation. Isabella paella takes a long time to make properly. If you had told me yesterday, "I know it's last minute," she interrupted with a practiced, sympathetic expression. "But Ethan's regional manager just got into town and it's a really important networking opportunity for him. You always say family comes first, right?" The manipulation was subtle but effective. How could I argue against helping my son's career, against family? So I canceled my book club, hand-washed Isabella's blouses, and spent the day preparing paella and cleaning the house for guests I would not be invited to join. When dinner time came, Isabella directed me to serve the food and then retire to my room with a plate explaining that shop talk would be boring for you anyway. As I ate alone in my small bedroom, I could hear laughter from the dining room. My dining room with the handcrafted table Miguel and I had bought on our 20th anniversary trip to Barcelona. I heard Isabella receiving compliments on the amazing paella I made, without a single mention of who had actually cooked it. That night I wrote in my journal, "I have become invisible in my own home." Miguel, is this what you were trying to warn me about? I feel like a ghost haunting these rooms, seen only when something needs to be cleaned or cooked or paid for. When did our son become this person? When did I become so small? Holidays were particularly difficult. Isabella insisted on hosting elaborate celebrations that showcased her entertaining skills to her growing network of upscale friends. These events required weeks of preparation, all done by me behind the scenes while Isabella took credit. For Thanksgiving 3 years after Miguel's death, the night everything changed. Isabella invited 8 guests, her parents, her brother and his wife Ethan's regional manager, and his wife and a couple Isabella described as extremely well connected in the design world. For 3 days, I shopped, cleaned, and cooked non-stop. Isabella dictated every detail. The menu must be traditional, but with elevated touches. The table setting had to be Instagram-worthy. The house needed to be immaculate. Ethan remained oblivious, buried in his phone or out running last-minute errands for Isabella. The morning of Thanksgiving, I was up at 5 a.m. to begin cooking. By the time guests arrived at 4 p.m., my back ached. My feet were swollen, and I had barely had time to change into the outfit Isabella had left on my bed. A simple black dress that ensured I would blend into the background like proper household staff. "Mom, can you stay in the kitchen during cocktail hour?" Ethan asked as the doorbell rang announcing the first guests. "Just to keep an eye on things and bring out appetizers when they're ready." Isabella's really nervous about impressing the Montgomerys. I nodded, swallowing my disappointment. I had hoped at least for the holiday I might be included. That my son might want to show me off to his boss, might be proud to introduce his mother, a retired elementary school teacher who had once been voted San Diego County Teacher of the Year. Instead, I became the unseen hand that delivered perfectly arranged appetizer platters, refreshed drinks, and cleared empty glasses while Isabella charmed her guests in the living room. When dinner was served, there were only 10 place settings at the table. "Elena, would you mind terribly eating in the kitchen?" Isabella asked quietly as I brought out the turkey. "We're just 1 chair short, and someone needs to be ready to bring out the sides and clear plates anyway." I looked to Ethan, hoping he might object. He was busying himself opening wine, avoiding my eyes. So I ate Thanksgiving dinner alone at the kitchen counter, the sounds of laughter and conversation floating in from the dining room. I had become so accustomed to this treatment that I didn't even cry. I just felt numb, until the moment that changed everything. And pecan pies I had baked that morning when Isabella's brother David knocked over his glass of red wine. The crimson liquid spread quickly across the white tablecloth. The hand-embroidered cloth that had been a wedding gift from Miguel's mother, one of my most treasured possessions. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," David exclaimed, grabbing his napkin ineffectually. "Don't worry about it," Isabella said with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. I could see her embarrassment and irritation. "Elena will take care of it." I set down the pies and hurried to the kitchen to get club soda and a clean cloth. When I returned, Isabella had risen from her seat and was heading toward the hallway closet. "Here, let me help," I offered, approaching the stain. Isabella returned, holding something that made my heart stop. A dirty old mop from the garage crusted with dust and cobwebs. We never used it for indoor cleaning. "Take this," she said, thrusting the filthy mop toward me in front of all her guests. The conversation around the table died instantly. I stood frozen, the club soda and clean cloth still in my hands, staring at the mop in disbelief. "Isabella?" one of the guests murmured uncomfortably. "What?" Isabella laughed, but it was a harsh sound. "Elena likes cleaning so much she might as well use this. Then she can eat the crumbs off the floor like the dog she is." The silence that followed was absolute. I felt blood rushing to my face, a roaring in my ears. "Isabella, that's enough," Ethan's boss muttered, clearly uncomfortable. I looked to my son, waiting for him to defend me to put a stop to this humiliation. Ethan had been staring at his plate, but now he looked up, and what I saw in his eyes broke my heart. Not outrage on my behalf, not shame at his wife's behavior, just annoyance at the social awkwardness of the moment. He cleared his throat. Mom, can you just clean it up quickly so we can get back to enjoying dessert? And remember, you're living here rent-free. The least you could do is help when we have important guests over. The club soda and cloth slipped from my hands, falling to the floor with a splash. Without a word, I turned and walked out of the dining room, past the kitchen, straight to my bedroom and closed the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the lock. I sank onto the edge of my bed, a strange calm replacing the initial shock. In that moment of utter humiliation, something had crystallized in my mind with perfect clarity. This was not my home anymore. These were not my people. And I had been a fool. I sat motionless for nearly an hour, hearing the murmur of conversation resume, then the sounds of guests departing. No one came to check on me. When the house had fallen silent, I unlocked my door and slipped out. It was after midnight. The dining room was a disaster. Dirty plates, half-eaten desserts, empty wine bottles. The stained tablecloth was still in place, the spilled wine now dried to a dark burgundy splotch on my treasured heirloom. I moved silently to Miguel's office, now Ethan's game room. The password to our family computer was still Miguel's birthday. Ethan had never bothered to change it. I logged into my bank account for the first time in months. The balance in my savings account was $87,440. I stared at the number in disbelief. 3 years ago, after Miguel's death, I had over $367,000. Where had nearly $280,000 gone? With shaking hands, I pulled up the transaction history and began scrolling backward through time. The evidence of my blindness was there in black and white. $3,200 for Ethan's car repair, $7,800 for roof repair, $4,500 for Isabella's website, $6,200 for their Cabo vacation, $12,000 for Isabella's business investment, $9,400 for Ethan's gaming equipment, $16,800 for the new kitchen appliances Isabella had insisted were necessary, $24,000 for the backyard remodel. The list went on, and that wasn't counting the monthly expenses. The mortgage I'd been paying on Ethan's downtown condo that they'd kept and rented out, pocketing the income, the utilities for this house, the grocery bills, the property taxes, the insurance. I had been systematically drained, not just financially, but emotionally, physically, and spiritually. I had become an ATM with a pulse expected to provide cash, cooking, cleaning, and constant accommodation while receiving nothing in return, not even basic respect. As I sat in the darkened office, a conversation from earlier that evening came flooding back to me, words I had overheard while bringing coffee to the living room after dinner. The Mediterranean cruise is absolutely worth the splurge, Isabella had been saying to the Montgomery woman. 3 weeks, all the best ports a suite with a private balcony. You only live once, right? That sounds incredible, Mrs. Montgomery replied. But so expensive. At least $15,000 per person, I'd imagine. Isabella laughed lightly. Oh, don't worry about the money part. Ethan's mom is sitting on a gold mine with this house in this neighborhood. Once we convince her to downsize to something more appropriate for her age, we'll have plenty to work with. We're actually looking at vacation properties in Tulum next spring. But isn't this her house? Someone asked. Technically, yes. Ethan's voice now slightly lowered, but still audible. But she's getting older, more forgetful. She needs supervision. We've been talking to an elder law attorney about power of attorney options. Mom's not really capable of managing her assets anymore. I felt physically ill. They were planning to take my house, to declare me incompetent, to steal everything Miguel and I had spent our lives building, and I had been helping them do it. The house was quiet and dark as I made my way back to my bedroom, my mind racing. Sleep was impossible. Instead, I pulled a small suitcase from under my bed and began carefully, silently packing the essentials, clothes, toiletries, medications, my jewelry, and the few family mementos I couldn't bear to leave behind. From behind a loose baseboard, a hiding spot Miguel had shown me years ago, I retrieved our important documents, my passport, birth certificate, social security card, and the deed to the house that still bore only Miguel's and my names. I also found the business card Richard Weinstein, our financial advisor, had given me after Miguel's funeral. Call any time, he had said. I tucked it carefully into my wallet. As dawn broke, I sat at my small desk and wrote 2 letters. The first was to Ethan. Ethan, last night I finally understood what your father tried to warn me about before he died. For 3 years I have allowed myself to be erased in my own home and exploited by my own child. I have given you nearly $280,000 of my retirement savings while being treated as an unpaid servant. I heard your conversation about seeking power of attorney over me about taking my house. I am not forgetful or incapable. I was simply trusting and blind to who you have become. I am leaving now. Effective immediately, I have canceled all automatic payments from my accounts. The mortgage on your downtown condo, the utilities for this house, your car insurance, your credit cards. These are now your responsibility, not mine. This house remains in my name. You have 60 days to find your own place to live. If you are not gone by then, I will begin formal eviction proceedings. I have loved you every day of your life, Ethan, from the moment you were born. I would have given you anything you truly needed. All you had to do was ask with honesty and respect. Instead, you chose deception and cruelty. Perhaps someday we can rebuild what has been broken, but it will need to be on different terms, with boundaries, honesty, and mutual respect. Mom, the second letter was to myself. Dear Elena, today you are reclaiming your life. Today you remember who you are, not just Ethan's mother or Miguel's widow, but Elena Alvarez Rodriguez, teacher, artist, woman of strength and dignity. Miguel tried to warn you. Now you must honor his memory by protecting what you built together and by living the life he wanted for you. Be brave. It's not too late to begin again. Elena, I folded both letters and placed Ethan's on the kitchen counter. Mine I tucked into my pocket. As I was about to leave, a sudden noise made me freeze. A knock at the door at 6:30 a.m. I peered through the peephole to see a familiar face. Javier Mendoza, Miguel's oldest friend and the one dinner guest from the previous night, who had looked genuinely uncomfortable during my humiliation. I opened the door cautiously. Elena, he said quietly, I couldn't sleep all night thinking about what happened. Are you all right? I looked at my packed suitcase visible in the hallway behind me, then back at Javier's concerned face. In that moment, I made a decision to trust one last time. No, Javier, I'm not all right, but I'm about to be. You're leaving, he stated, not a question. I nodded. Good, he said firmly, surprising me. What they did was inexcusable. Where will you go? I have a cousin in Santa Fe, Carmen Sanchez. Miguel and I visited her a few years ago. She offered her guest house after Miguel died, but I wasn't ready to leave then. Javier nodded. Let me drive you to the airport. But what about your wife? Won't she tell Isabella and Ethan? His expression hardened. Maria and I both witnessed what happened last night. Neither of us will betray your confidence. Some things are unforgivable, Elena. Tears filled my eyes, not from sadness this time, but from the relief of being seen, of having my experience validated. Thank you, I whispered. 20 minutes later, my suitcase was in Javier's car, and I was taking one last look at the house Miguel and I had filled with love for 3 decades. It no longer felt like mine. Perhaps it hadn't for a long time. As Javier drove me to the airport, I made 3 phone calls, first to my bank, where I canceled every automatic payment and transferred the majority of my remaining funds to a new account at a different institution. Second, to Richard Weinstein, who answered despite the early hour and agreed to meet me at the airport before my flight to review my financial situation. Third, to Carmen, who answered with sleep in her voice but was wide awake by the time I finished my abbreviated explanation. Mi prima, she said without hesitation. My home is your home for as long as you need. The guest house is waiting for you. We'll rebuild your life together. As the San Diego coastline receded below my plane that afternoon, I felt a complex mixture of grief, anger, fear, and, surprising myself, hope. I had lost much money that couldn't be recovered, years that couldn't be reclaimed, and most painfully the son I thought I knew. But I had not lost myself. Not completely. Not yet. In the small notebook I'd brought on the plane, I began to write day 1 of my new life. Miguel, I'm finally taking your advice. I'm keeping my independence. I'm going to live. I didn't know exactly what awaited me in Santa Fe. I didn't know if my damaged relationship with Ethan could ever be repaired. I didn't know how I would rebuild financially with less than 1/3 of my savings remaining. But I knew this: I would never again allow anyone to make me invisible. I would never again pay for the privilege of being mistreated. I would never again confuse sacrifice with self-erasure. The next chapter of Elena Alvarez Rodriguez's life was about to begin. The desert air hit my face like a cleansing breath when I stepped off the plane in Santa Fe. Dry, crisp, and nothing like San Diego's ocean humidity. It felt symbolic somehow. I was leaving behind the fog of manipulation for clarity. Carmen was waiting for me at arrivals, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, her arms open wide. We hadn't seen each other in person since Miguel's funeral, but we'd spoken monthly by phone. I'd never told her what was happening with Ethan and Isabella. Pride, I suppose. Shame at being so blind. "Mi querida prima," she exclaimed, embracing me tightly. At 68, Carmen was 3 years my senior, but her energy put women half her age to shame. "I have the guest house all ready for you." The tears I'd held back on the plane suddenly overwhelmed me. I sobbed into her shoulder right there in the middle of the airport while travelers flowed around us like a river parting around a stone. "Let it all out," Carmen murmured, stroking my hair. "You're safe now." Carmen's adobe home sat on 2 acres at the edge of town with stunning views of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The guest house, a small but beautifully appointed casita with terracotta floors and traditional Vigas ceiling beams, stood 30 yards from the main house, offering both proximity and privacy. "It was meant to be my studio," Carmen explained as she showed me around, "but I ended up converting the sunroom instead. This space has just been waiting for you." The casita had 1 bedroom, a full bathroom, a kitchenette, and a small living area with a kiva fireplace. Simple, but more than enough. Through the windows I could see Carmen's garden, dormant now in late November, but I could imagine its springtime beauty. "I stocked the refrigerator and pantry," Carmen said. "There's a fresh tortilla delivery from Guadalupe's Panaderia on the counter. The Wi-Fi password is on the fridge. And I put extra blankets in the trunk at the foot of the bed. The desert nights get cold." I turned to my cousin, overwhelmed by her thoughtfulness. "Carmen, I don't know how to thank you." She waved away my gratitude. "Family helps family, Elena. Real family." Her emphasis on real was pointed. "Now you must be exhausted. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we'll talk about what comes next." After Carmen left, I unpacked my single suitcase, all I had brought from my previous life. The casita felt foreign yet welcoming, like a blank canvas, waiting for new memories to be painted. I brewed a cup of chamomile tea and sat by the window watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and purple. My phone had been buzzing periodically since I'd landed, Ethan no doubt discovering my absence and the letter I'd left. I hadn't looked at any of the messages. Not yet. Tonight was for regrouping, for breathing, for beginning to process what had happened and what I had allowed to happen. On the small desk in the corner, I placed the 3 items I had brought for strength: Miguel's letter warning me about financial independence, the family photo from Ethan's college graduation, when we were still truly a family, and the business card from Richard Weinstein, the financial advisor I had met with at the airport. That meeting had been sobering. Richard had been shocked by how much money I'd given Ethan and Isabella. "Elena, this isn't just generosity. This is financial abuse," he'd said bluntly as we reviewed the transactions over coffee at the Terminal Cafe. "And their plans to seek power of attorney. That's deeply concerning." Richard had helped me create a financial recovery plan. My remaining 87,404 would need to be carefully managed. The house in San Diego was still my biggest asset, but it was illiquid for now. "You'll need to evict them legally if they refuse to leave," he'd warned. "It could get messy. Are you prepared for that?" I'd nodded, though the thought made my stomach churn. The idea of legal proceedings against my own son was almost unbearable. But the alternative, continuing to be exploited until I had nothing left, was worse. Richard had connected me with a lawyer friend in Santa Fe who specialized in elder financial abuse cases. "Call Gabriela Ortiz tomorrow," he'd instructed. "She'll help you protect what you have left." Now, as I sipped my tea and watched the New Mexico darkness settle over the landscape, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my situation. I was 65 years old, starting over with a fraction of my retirement savings in a new city, hiding from my only child who had betrayed me in the most fundamental way. Yet beneath the grief and anger, something else was stirring, something that felt surprisingly like freedom. For the first time in 3 years, there were no demands on my time, no expectations to fulfill, no subtle manipulations to navigate. I answered to no one but myself. My phone buzzed again. With a deep breath, I finally looked at the screen. 27 missed calls and 42 text messages, all from Ethan and Isabella. The texts followed a predictable pattern. "Mom, where are you? 7:15 a.m. This isn't funny. Call me back immediately." 8:22 a.m. "Mom, Isabella is really worried about you." 9:47 a.m. "We found your letter. We need to talk about this like adults." 10:03 a.m. You're being completely unreasonable. 11:36 a.m. The bank says all the payments were rejected. What did you do? 1:14 p.m. Mom, this is serious. We have bills due this week. 2:27 p.m. You can't just cut us off like this. We're family. 3:52 p.m. If you don't call me back today, I'm calling the police to report you missing. 5:08 p.m. The most recent one from just 10 minutes ago made my blood run cold. I spoke to Dr. Harmon about your erratic behavior and sudden disappearance. He thinks it might be early onset dementia. We're looking into emergency guardianship options. Please come home so we can get you the help you need. 7:43 p.m. They were already setting the groundwork to declare me incompetent. My hands shook as I typed a single reply: I am safe. I am of sound mind. I have consulted with both financial and legal advisors about the systematic financial abuse I've experienced. Any attempt to seek guardianship will be met with a full forensic accounting of where my money has gone. Do not contact me again until you're ready to acknowledge what you've done. I turned off my phone, set it on the nightstand, and curled up on the unfamiliar bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight at least I was safe from their manipulation. Carmen's kitchen smelled of coffee and fresh corn tortillas when I entered the main house the next morning. She looked up from the stove where she was scrambling eggs with chorizo and smiled. Buenos dias, did you sleep? A little, I admitted. My mind wouldn't stop racing. She nodded understandingly and poured me coffee. So what's your plan? The directness of her question caught me off guard. In San Diego, my days had been dictated by Ethan and Isabella's needs and whims. The concept of having my own plan felt almost foreign. I need to speak with that lawyer, Gabriela Ortiz, and I should find a job something part-time to supplement my savings until I figure out the house situation. Carmen set a plate of eggs before me. Eat first, then calls. I made an appointment for you with Gabriela at 2 p.m. today. As for work, my friend Luisa runs the cultural center downtown. They need someone to teach beginner art classes to seniors. With your teaching background, you'd be perfect. I stared at my cousin in amazement. Carmen, you've thought of everything. She sat across from me with her own plate. When Miguel called me after his diagnosis, he made me promise to look out for you if things went sideways. He was worried about Ethan, even then. Miguel knew. The revelation stunned me. He never said he didn't want to come between you and your son. He hoped Ethan would grow up, step up, but he had concerns about the way Ethan and Isabella treated you even before he got sick. Carmen's expression softened. Miguel adored you, Elena. He just wanted to protect you even after he was gone. I pushed my eggs around the plate, processing this information. I should have seen it sooner. Stop that, Carmen said firmly. No self-blame. You were grieving. They took advantage. Now you're taking back control. That's what matters. After breakfast, I turned my phone back on, steeling myself for more messages from Ethan. Instead, I found a text from Javier Elena Maria, and I confronted Ethan about how they treated you. He's telling everyone you're having a mental health crisis. Be careful. Isabella was asking if anyone knew where you might have gone. We said nothing. Stay safe. We're here if you need anything. I showed Carmen the message in Ethan's text about dementia. Her eyes flashed with anger. We need to document everything. Screenshots, bank records, witnesses. If they're building a case against your competency, we need to build a stronger one proving their financial exploitation. With newfound determination, I spent the morning gathering evidence. I took screenshots of all threatening texts, downloaded 3 years of bank statements showing the systematic draining of my accounts, and wrote a detailed timeline of how the situation had evolved since Miguel's death. By the time Carmen drove me to meet with Gabriela Ortiz at her downtown office, I had compiled a substantial digital record of the financial and emotional abuse. Gabriela, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense manner, reviewed my evidence with growing concern. Mrs. Rodriguez, what you're describing is unfortunately common, but that doesn't make it any less serious. Your son and daughter-in-law have taken approximately $280,000 from you, while simultaneously creating conditions that could be classified as elder abuse, social isolation, gaslighting, creating dependency, and now attempting to question your mental competency. What can I do? I asked. First, we file a formal notice of eviction for your San Diego property. They have no legal right to live there without your permission. She made a note in her legal pad. Second, we prepare a cease and desist regarding any attempts to pursue guardianship or power of attorney over you. Third, I suggest you undergo a formal cognitive assessment with a geriatric specialist here in Santa Fe, documentation that will establish your competency beyond any doubt. And the money they took, I asked. Gabriella's expression was measured. Recovering those funds may be challenging. Much will depend on whether you can prove the money was given under duress or false pretenses rather than as gifts. Did you maintain any documentation of loan agreements when you transferred these funds? My heart sank. No, it was always presented as just until next month, or we'll pay you back when this commission comes in, but nothing in writing. That complicates things but doesn't make it impossible. The pattern of exploitation is clear, especially when combined with the other forms of controlling behavior. She leaned forward. Mrs. Rodriguez, are you certain you want to pursue this legally? It would mean essentially suing your son. The question hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything, part of me still loved Ethan. He was my only child, the baby I had nursed, the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, the teenager whose heartbreaks I had soothed. I need to think about that part, I admitted. But please proceed with the eviction notice and the cease and desist regarding guardianship, and I'll schedule the cognitive assessment immediately. Gabriella nodded. That's a reasonable approach. Give yourself time to consider the financial recovery options. Meanwhile, we'll protect your autonomy and your property. As Carmen drove me back to her house, my phone rang. Ethan again. This time I decided to answer, putting it on speaker so Carmen could hear. Mom, finally. Ethan's voice contained equal parts relief and irritation. Where are you? We've been worried sick. I'm safe, Ethan. That's all you need to know. Mom, this isn't like you. Disappearing, cutting off financial support, leaving threatening letters. We're concerned about your mental state. I took a deep breath. My mental state is perfectly clear. I've simply opened my eyes to what's been happening in my own home. What are you talking about? We've been taking care of you. Taking care of me? I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. By treating me like an unpaid servant, by systematically draining my retirement savings, by planning to declare me incompetent so you could take my house. That's absurd, Ethan sputtered. Isabella and I have been supporting you since Dad died. You're twisting everything. Ethan, I have bank statements showing nearly $280,000 transferred from my account to yours over 3 years, money that was never repaid. I have texts and emails proving the manipulation. I even have witnesses to how I was treated at Thanksgiving. A long pause. Mom, you're blowing things out of proportion. We're family. Families help each other out. Help goes both ways, son. All I received in return was disrespect and exploitation. So what now? His tone hardened. You're just cutting us off completely. What about the mortgage payment due next week? What about the property taxes? You can't just abandon your responsibilities. Those are your responsibilities now, Ethan, not mine. You have 60 days to vacate my house per the formal eviction notice you'll receive tomorrow. Eviction! His voice rose to a shout. You're evicting your own son, Mom. This is insane. No, Ethan. What was insane was allowing myself to be treated like a servant in my own home while financing your lifestyle. That period of my life is over. Where are you? He demanded. We need to talk about this in person. Isabella is in tears. This stress isn't good for her condition. I frowned. What condition? A weighted pause. We were going to tell you at Christmas. Isabella is pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother, Mom. That's why we've been so stressed about money lately. We're preparing for the baby. The revelation hit me like a punch to the stomach. A grandchild. The one thing I had longed for since Ethan married Isabella 5 years ago. Carmen, seeing my expression, squeezed my arm in warning. Convenient timing, she whispered. Ethan, I said carefully, if Isabella is truly pregnant, then I'm happy for you both. But it doesn't change what's happened or justify your behavior. How can you say that? His voice broke. Your own grandchild will be born into instability because you've decided to punish us over some perceived slight. Perceived slight? I repeated incredulously. Your wife handed me a dirty mop in front of dinner guests and told me to eat off the floor like a dog. You stood by and said nothing. That's not a slight, Ethan. It's abuse. She apologized for that. She was stressed about impressing the Montgomerys. You know how important that connection is for her business. No, she didn't apologize. Neither did you. And now you're trying to manipulate me with news of a grandchild. I need to go, Ethan. Mom, wait. I ended the call, my hands shaking. "Do you believe her?" Carmen asked as she pulled into her driveway. "About the pregnancy." I sighed heavily. "I don't know what to believe anymore. They've lied so many times, but using an unborn child to manipulate me would be a new low even for them." That night I couldn't sleep. The possibility of a grandchild complicated everything. If Isabella was truly pregnant, could I really leave my only grandchild to grow up in financial instability? But then wasn't that exactly the kind of thinking that had led me to this situation in the first place? Putting Ethan's needs above my own welfare, to my own detriment. Around midnight, I received an email from Ethan with an attachment, an ultrasound image with Isabella's name and a date from 2 weeks ago. "Mom, meet your grandchild. 12 weeks along. Due, June 7th. Please come home so we can work this out as a family. We need you. The baby needs you." I stared at the grainy image, tears welling in my eyes. A grandchild. Everything I had dreamed of. But something didn't feel right. I forwarded the email to Carmen, who was still awake watching late-night television in the main house. Her response came minutes later. "Check the metadata on that image. Also, ultrasound images usually have more medical information visible. This looks cropped." Following Carmen's suggestion, I examined the image properties and did a reverse image search online. What I found left me cold. The ultrasound was a stock photo available on several pregnancy websites with Isabella's name crudely added. They were lying about a pregnancy to manipulate me into returning. I texted Carmen, "You were right. It's fake." Her reply was instant. "These people have no bottom. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we accelerate everything." The next morning brought a flurry of activity. First, I underwent a comprehensive cognitive assessment with Dr. Adelina Fuentes, a geriatric neurologist recommended by Gabriela. After 3 hours of rigorous testing, her conclusion was unequivocal. "Mrs. Rodriguez, your cognitive function is excellent across all domains. Memory, executive function, processing speed, everything. There is absolutely no indication of dementia or any other cognitive impairment. In fact, your test scores are above average for your age group." The relief I felt was profound. Though I had never doubted my own mental acuity, having official documentation from a respected specialist was powerful ammunition against Ethan and Isabella's attempts to question my competence. Next came a meeting with Luis Menendez, a forensic accountant Gabriela had brought into my case. Luis had spent the morning analyzing my financial records. "Mrs. Rodriguez, the pattern here is textbook financial exploitation," he explained, pointing to a chart showing the steady decline of my savings. "Large, irregular transfers that accelerated over time. No evidence of repayment. Increasing frequency coinciding with your son's growing financial commitments. The second car purchased, the timeshare in Cabo, the high-end electronics. Can we prove they were loans, not gifts?" I asked. "The text messages help considerably," Luis replied. "References to paying you back next month establish intent. And this email from your son, 'Mom, just need to borrow $4K until my commission check comes in,' that's pretty clear." Gabriela, who had joined us for this meeting, added, "With Luis's analysis and the documentation you've provided, we have a strong case for financial exploitation. The question remains, do you want to pursue full legal action against your son?" I looked down at the financial projections Luis had prepared. At my current rate of savings depletion and without access to the equity in my San Diego home, I would be completely broke within 5 years. The retirement Miguel had carefully planned for us would be gone, leaving me dependent on Social Security and whatever minimal income I could earn at 65 plus. "What are my options?" I asked. "We can pursue civil litigation to recover the funds, which would require suing your son and daughter-in-law," Gabriela explained. "Or we can file a report of elder financial abuse with Adult Protective Services in California, which could lead to criminal charges. Alternatively, we could use the threat of these actions to negotiate a settlement." The thought of seeing Ethan in court, or worse, in criminal proceedings, made my stomach twist. Despite everything, he was still my son. "Let's start with the eviction and a formal demand letter for repayment," I decided. "Give them one chance to make this right voluntarily before we escalate further." Gabriela nodded. "A reasonable approach. I'll draft the demand letter today. We'll request a repayment plan for $250,000 of the funds, which gives them a $30,000 discount, but still recovers the bulk of what was taken." That afternoon, Carmen accompanied me to the Santa Fe Cultural Center to meet her friend Luisa about the teaching position. The center was a beautiful adobe building with a central courtyard housing art studios, performance spaces, and classrooms. Luisa Vega, the center's director, greeted us warmly. "Carmen has told me so much about you, Elena. We're desperately in need of someone with your teaching experience. Our seniors art program has been on hiatus since our last instructor moved to Colorado. I should warn you I haven't taught formally since I retired from elementary school 8 years ago," I admitted. Luisa waved away my concern. "Teaching children requires much more patience than teaching adults. The position is 3 classes per week, 2 hours each, $25 per hour. It's not much, but our students are wonderful, and many of them are fellow transplants to Santa Fe. You might make some good friends." The prospect of teaching again, of having purpose, community, and even a small income of my own, lifted my spirits considerably. I accepted the position on the spot and scheduled my first class for the following Monday. As Carmen and I left the Cultural Center, my phone rang, an unfamiliar number with a San Diego area code. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Detective Mark Sandoval with the San Diego Police Department Elder Abuse Unit. Do you have a moment to speak?" My heart raced. "Yes, of course." "We've received a report expressing concern about your welfare. Your son, Ethan Rodriguez, contacted us stating that you've disappeared under concerning circumstances and may be experiencing cognitive decline that puts you at risk." I exchanged a glance with Carmen, who had heard the detective's words through the phone's speaker. "Detective Sandoval, I can assure you I am perfectly fine. I left my home voluntarily after experiencing financial and emotional abuse from my son and daughter-in-law. I am currently staying with my cousin in Santa Fe, New Mexico." "I see," the detective replied, his tone neutral. "Are you willing to provide contact information for someone who can verify your current situation and well-being? A local doctor, perhaps, or an attorney?" "Absolutely. I've just completed a full cognitive assessment with Dr. Adelina Fuentes here in Santa Fe. I'm also working with attorney Gabriela Ortiz regarding the financial exploitation I've experienced. I'm happy to provide their contact information." After I shared the requested details, Detective Sandoval's tone warmed slightly. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mrs. Rodriguez. Unfortunately, we see cases like this quite frequently. Family members reporting elderly relatives as missing or impaired when those individuals have simply removed themselves from abusive situations." "Does this mean my son is filing a missing persons report?" I asked. He attempted to, yes. "Based on our conversation and the professional contacts you've provided, I'll be closing that report as unfounded. You're clearly not missing, and you appear to be making competent decisions for your own welfare." After ending the call, I leaned against Carmen's car, relief washing over me. "They're getting desperate," Carmen observed. "Filing a police report is a serious escalation." I nodded, a new resolution hardening within me. "They're not going to stop, are they? The fake pregnancy now, this? They'll try anything to regain control." "People who are accustomed to exploiting others don't give up their meal ticket easily," Carmen said grimly. "But you have something they don't." "What's that?" "The truth. And now professional documentation of that truth from multiple sources." She unlocked the car. "Come on, let's get home and call Gabriela. It's time to accelerate the legal response." That evening, Gabriela emailed me drafts of 3 documents: the formal eviction notice for the San Diego house, the demand letter for financial repayment, and a cease and desist regarding any further attempts to question my competency or whereabouts. "These will be delivered by courier tomorrow," she explained during our phone call. "Be prepared for an emotional reaction. Based on their pattern of behavior, they're likely to escalate before they consider compliance." "I'm ready," I told her, though my stomach knotted at the thought of what might come next. I didn't have to wait long to find out. At 9:37 the next morning, my phone exploded with calls and texts from Ethan, Isabella, and even Isabella's parents. I let them go to voicemail, following Gabriela's advice not to engage directly now that legal proceedings were in motion. Ethan's voicemail was almost incoherent with rage. "How dare you send legal papers to our house? An eviction notice. A demand for $250,000. Have you completely lost your mind? We're your family. You can't evict your own son and his pregnant wife. We've done nothing but take care of you for 3 years." Isabella's message was more controlled, but equally threatening. "Elena, this is absolutely unacceptable. We've consulted our own attorney, who says your claims of financial exploitation are baseless. The money you gave us was clearly gifted. We have witnesses who heard you offer financial support. If you persist with these ridiculous legal actions, we'll have no choice but to petition for guardianship. Your behavior is clearly irrational." The most surprising call came from Isabella's father, a man I'd met only a handful of times. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Robert Montgomery. I'm extremely concerned about the stress you're causing my daughter during her pregnancy. This vindictive behavior is harming your own grandchild. Whatever disagreement you have with Ethan and Isabella, surely it can be resolved without lawyers and eviction notices. Be reasonable for God's sake." So they were maintaining the pregnancy lie even with Isabella's parents. The depth of their deception was staggering. I forwarded the voicemails to Gabriella, who responded quickly. Classic intimidation tactics. The reference to their own attorney is likely a bluff, but even if it's not, our documentation is solid. The guardianship threat is empty now that we have Dr. Fuentes' assessment. Stay the course. By evening, the tone of Ethan's messages had changed from anger to desperation. "Mom, please call me. We can work this out. We don't have $250,000. We don't even have $25,000. The business hasn't been doing well. Where are we supposed to go in 60 days? We can't afford rent in this neighborhood. What about the baby? Don't you care about your own grandchild? I felt a familiar pull. The maternal instinct to rescue, to solve my child's problems, to sacrifice my needs for his. But then I remembered the dirty mop thrust into my hands, the cruel words, the systematic draining of the security Miguel had worked so hard to provide for me. I texted back a single message. "All communication must go through my attorney Gabriela Ortiz. Her contact information is in the documents you received." Then I turned off my phone, poured myself a glass of Carmen's homemade sangria, and sat on the patio of the casita, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "You're doing the right thing," Carmen said, joining me with her own glass. "It's not easy, but it's right." "I keep wondering where I went wrong with him," I admitted. "How did my sweet boy turn into someone who could treat his mother this way?" Carmen considered this. Miguel used to say that Ethan had been given too much too easily, that he never learned the value of work or the meaning of enough. I nodded sadly. We wanted to give him everything we didn't have growing up. Maybe that was our mistake. Perhaps, Carmen agreed. But his choices as an adult are his own, Elena. You can love him without enabling him. You can forgive him eventually, without putting yourself back in harm's way. We sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, the first stars appearing in the clear desert sky. "What will you do if they refuse to leave the house?" Carmen finally asked. "Gabriella says we can file for a formal eviction through the courts if they ignore the notice. It would take another 30-45 days, but eventually the sheriff would remove them if necessary." Carmen looked troubled. "And if they damage the house out of spite?" I'd considered this possibility and discussed it with Gabriella. "The house is insured. And honestly, Carmen, even if they trashed every inch of it, it would still be worth a lot for the land alone in that neighborhood. I can't let fear of what they might do control my decisions anymore." "Good," Carmen said firmly. "That's how they kept you under control for 3 years, through fear, obligation, and guilt. The 3 chains that bind so many women to abusive situations." I thought about the art class I would be teaching on Monday, the new bank account I had opened in Santa Fe, the small routine I was beginning to establish here. Baby steps toward a new life. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I'm 65 years old, starting over with a fraction of my savings in a new city, with no guarantee that I'll ever recover the money they took. This isn't how I imagined my retirement." Carmen reached across the small table and squeezed my hand. "No, it's not what you planned, but you're facing it with courage, Elena. Miguel would be so proud of you." As if on cue, my phone lit up with a new message notification. Not from Ethan this time, but from Javier Mendoza. "Elena thought you should know. Ethan and Isabella are telling everyone you've had some kind of breakdown and abandoned them. Maria and I corrected the record at church today, telling people what we witnessed at Thanksgiving. Several others spoke up with similar observations about how they treated you. Not everyone believes their lies. Stay strong. P.S. I'll be in Santa Fe next month for a photography workshop. May I visit you?" I showed the message to Carmen, who raised an eyebrow. "Miguel's friend, the one who helped you escape." I nodded. A small smile played at the corners of Carmen's mouth. "Interesting. It's not like that," I protested. "He's just being kind." Carmen hummed skeptically. "Well, kindness is a good place to start." For the first time since the Thanksgiving disaster, I felt a genuine laugh bubble up from somewhere deep inside me. It felt rusty, unfamiliar, but real. Maybe, just maybe, there was life after betrayal. A different life than I had planned, but perhaps one with its own unexpected joys. Tomorrow would bring new challenges in this legal and emotional battle with Ethan and Isabella. But tonight, sitting under the stars with my cousin sipping sangria and actually laughing, tonight I could believe that I had made the right choice in walking away. I was reclaiming not just my finances, but myself. And no matter what happened with the house or the money, or even my relationship with my son, that was a victory no one could take from me. The first snow of December dusted Santa Fe like powdered sugar on a sopapilla. From the window of my casita, I watched the sunrise illuminate the white-capped Sangre de Cristo Mountains, turning them brilliant gold and rose. 3 weeks had passed since my escape from San Diego, and slowly, painfully, I was creating a life for myself here. My art class at the Cultural Center had quickly become the highlight of my week. My students, 12 seniors ranging from 68 to 92 years old, approached watercolor painting with a mixture of enthusiasm, frustration, and laughter that reminded me why I had loved teaching for 30 years. Mrs. Rodriguez, I think I've flooded the paper again, called Doris Meyer, an 84-year-old former accountant whose precision with numbers didn't translate to controlling water on paper. I moved to her table smiling. That's part of watercolor's beauty, Doris. Let's see what happens if we tilt the paper this way and let the colors blend naturally. It looks like a mess to me, she grumbled, but allowed me to demonstrate. Sometimes the most beautiful things come from what seems like chaos, I told her. Look, see how the blue and yellow are creating this lovely green where they meet. We couldn't have planned that exact shade. As I guided my students through the basics of watercolor technique, I felt a sense of purpose returning. Here I wasn't Ethan's mother or Miguel's widow. I was Mrs. Rodriguez, the art teacher. My expertise was valued. My presence mattered. After class, Luisa pulled me aside. The students love you, Elena. 3 more have signed up after hearing about your class. Would you consider adding another session on Thursdays? The request brought both pride and practical relief. Another class meant additional income, which I desperately needed. Though Gabriella had helped me create a tight budget to stretch my remaining savings, the reality of my financial situation remained precarious. I'd be delighted, I told Luisa. As I packed up my teaching supplies, my phone buzzed with an email notification from Gabriella Elena. We've received a response to our legal documents from your son and daughter-in-law's attorney, James Bennett. The tone is aggressive, but the substance is weak, mostly denials and attempts to reframe your financial support as gifts freely given with no expectation of repayment. More concerning, they're still pursuing the competency angle, requesting a court-ordered evaluation, despite Dr. Fuentes' comprehensive assessment. They've attached affidavits from Isabella's father, a physician, though not in geriatrics or neurology, suggesting your erratic behavior indicates possible cognitive impairment. They're also challenging the eviction, claiming they've made substantial improvements to the property that entitle them to continued occupancy or financial compensation. None of these arguments hold legal water, but they're clearly attempting to intimidate and delay. I've scheduled a court date for January 15th regarding both the eviction and financial recovery. Most troubling development. They're requesting an emergency hearing next week to seek temporary guardianship pending proper medical evaluation. We need to respond forcefully. Can you come to the office tomorrow at 10 a.m., Gabriela Ortiz Esec? My hands trembled as I read the email. They weren't giving up. In fact, they were escalating dramatically, attempting to have me declared incompetent through the courts, despite clear medical evidence to the contrary. The implications were terrifying. If they somehow succeeded, I would lose all control over my life, my finances, and my future. Bad news, asked Martha Sullivan, a 76-year-old widow who had stayed behind to help clean brushes. I hesitated, then decided to be honest. Something about Martha's kind eyes and no-nonsense demeanor invited confidence. My son and daughter-in-law are trying to have me declared incompetent so they can take control of my finances. Martha's expression hardened. Let me guess. You've got money or property they want. A house in San Diego, and what's left of my retirement savings. She nodded grimly. Same thing happened to my sister June in Phoenix. Her son and that awful wife of his tried the same trick when she wouldn't loan them money for some harebrained business scheme. What happened? I asked, desperate for any insight or hope. June fought back, got doctor's evaluations, hired a shark of a lawyer, and documented everything. When the judge saw the evidence, he not only threw out their case, but ordered them to pay all her legal fees. Martha squeezed my arm. Don't let them intimidate you, Elena. These vultures count on our generation being too ashamed or scared to fight back. Her words struck a chord. Shame had been a powerful force in my silence for 3 years. Shame at being treated poorly by my own child. Shame at my financial naivety. Shame at finding myself in such a position after a lifetime of careful planning with Miguel. "I'm done being ashamed," I said more to myself than to Martha. "Good," she nodded approvingly. "And you're not fighting alone. Give me your phone number. A few of us old ladies meet for coffee on Wednesdays. You should join us." That evening, I sat with Carmen in her kitchen as we prepared dinner together, chopping vegetables for pozole, while I recounted Gabriella's email and my conversation with Martha. "This guardianship attempt is serious, Elena," Carmen said, her knife pausing mid-chop. "If they somehow succeeded—" "They won't," I said with more confidence than I felt. "Gabriella says Dr. Fuentes' evaluation is comprehensive and unimpeachable, and we have documentation of their financial exploitation, which provides clear motive for why they're attacking my competency. Still, courts can be unpredictable, and they have Isabella's father, a doctor, making statements against you." Carmen resumed, chopping her movements sharp with anger. "What else does Gabriella suggest? She didn't say in the email that's what tomorrow's meeting is about." I sighed, adding minced garlic to the pot. "I just can't believe Ethan would go this far. Trying to have his own mother declared incompetent, taking away my legal rights. This is beyond money, Carmen. This is cruel." Carmen was quiet for a moment. "Have you told Javier about these developments?" He offered to help, and as a witness to their treatment of you at Thanksgiving, his testimony could be valuable. Javier. His texts had become a source of unexpected comfort over the past 3 weeks, checking in regularly, offering quiet encouragement, sharing small observations about his day that made me feel connected to something beyond my legal battle. "I haven't told him about this latest escalation," I admitted. "I don't want to burden him." Carmen gave me a knowing look. "Is it a burden to help someone you care about? Besides, he's coming to Santa Fe next week for that photography workshop. He should know what's happening." That night after dinner, I sat on the small porch of my casita and composed a text to Javier. "Javier, things have escalated with Ethan and Isabella. They've hired a lawyer and are attempting to seek guardianship over me, claiming I'm mentally incompetent. I'm meeting with my attorney tomorrow to prepare our response. Just wanted to keep you updated as your observations from Thanksgiving may become important evidence." His response came within minutes. "This is outrageous, but not surprising given their behavior. I've already documented everything I witnessed that night. Maria has as well. We're both prepared to provide sworn statements or testify if needed. I arrive in Santa Fe on Tuesday. Would meeting in person be helpful? You're not alone in this fight, Elena." His steadfast support brought tears to my eyes. 3 weeks ago, I had felt utterly alone apart from Carmen. Now I had Gabriella, Martha, and her friends from art class, and Javier, people who believed me, supported me, and were willing to stand beside me against Ethan and Isabella's manipulations. The next morning, seated in Gabriella's office with Carmen beside me for moral support, I learned the full extent of what we were facing. "Their strategy is transparent, but potentially effective if we don't counter it aggressively," Gabriella explained, spreading documents across her desk. "They're challenging your competency because if they succeed even temporarily, they could potentially access your accounts and delay or prevent the eviction." "How can they possibly prove I'm incompetent when we have Dr. Fuentes' evaluation?" I asked. "They're claiming the evaluation was conducted after you'd been unduly influenced by me and your cousin, suggesting we coached you to perform well on the tests." Gabriella's expression was grim. "It's absurd, but their attorney is requesting a court-appointed evaluator, which would delay proceedings by months. And during those months, they'd stay in my house and possibly gain access to my accounts," I clarified. "Exactly. It's a delay tactic, but a dangerous one." Gabriella leaned forward. "Elena, I recommend we take a more aggressive approach than we initially discussed. Instead of simply defending against their claims, we file our own emergency petition documenting elder abuse, both financial and emotional." "That would mean formally accusing Ethan of elder abuse," I said, my voice faltering. Despite everything, taking such a step against my only child felt like crossing a final irrevocable line. "It would," Gabriella acknowledged. "But it would also shift the momentum, forcing them to defend against serious allegations rather than attacking your competency. And frankly, based on the evidence we've gathered, their financial exploitation meets the legal definition of elder abuse in both New Mexico and California." Carmen squeezed my hand. "Elena, I know this is difficult, but they've shown they're willing to destroy your autonomy to get what they want. You need to protect yourself." I closed my eyes briefly, remembering Miguel's letter, "Keep your financial independence. Don't let anyone, even our son, make you feel less than the extraordinary woman you are." "What would this entail?" I asked Gabriella. "We file a comprehensive petition documenting the financial exploitation, $280,000 in loans, never repaid, the evidence of emotional abuse and isolation, and their current attempt to have you declared incompetent despite clear medical evidence to the contrary. We request an emergency protective order preventing them from accessing your finances or making any decisions on your behalf, expedited eviction, and a court order for financial restitution." "Would this become public record?" I asked, thinking of the shame and embarrassment Ethan would face if his actions became widely known. "Yes," Gabriella said honestly. "But Elena, they're already trying to publicly declare you mentally incompetent. Which narrative would you rather have on record? That you're an incapable elder being rightfully managed by your concerned son, or that you're a victim standing up against exploitation?" Put that way, the choice became clearer. "There's one more thing you should know," Gabriella added. "I've been in contact with 3 other clients in similar situations who are willing to form a support group for elders fighting financial exploitation. You wouldn't have to face this alone." By the time I left Gabriella's office that afternoon, we had a comprehensive plan in place. We would file our elder abuse petition the following day with sworn statements from Carmen Javier Maria and several neighbors from San Diego who had witnessed my gradual isolation and servant-like role in my own home. Gabriella had also arranged for a second cognitive assessment with a different specialist, a neurologist so eminent that his evaluation would be virtually unassailable in court. And she had drafted a detailed financial accounting of every dollar taken from my accounts over the past 3 years, with evidence of the temporary loan language Ethan had used when requesting the money. As Carmen drove us home, I felt a curious mixture of dread and relief. The path ahead would be difficult and painful, but for the first time I was truly fighting back rather than merely escaping. "Are you okay?" Carmen asked gently. "No," I admitted. "But I will be." That evening I received an unexpected call from Martha Sullivan, my student from art class. "Elena, I hope you don't mind me calling. I spoke with some of the ladies from our coffee group about your situation, and it turns out Susan Wilder's daughter is a reporter for the Santa Fe New Mexican. She specializes in stories about elder issues and financial abuse. Susan thought you might want to talk to her, put a spotlight on what your son and daughter-in-law are trying to do." The suggestion took me aback. I hadn't considered going public with this. "You don't have to decide now," Martha said quickly. "But sometimes these predators, even when they're family, back down when they realize their actions might become public knowledge. Just something to consider." After we hung up, I sat on my porch watching the stars emerge in the clear desert sky, considering Martha's suggestion. The thought of publicly discussing my situation made my stomach knot with anxiety. But hadn't silence and shame enabled the abuse to continue for 3 years? How many other elderly parents were suffering similarly, too embarrassed to speak up or fight back? I texted Gabriella to get her legal opinion on speaking to a reporter. Her response was cautious, but not dismissive. While we wouldn't want to prejudice court proceedings, a carefully structured interview focusing on the broader issue of elder financial abuse, using your experience as an example, could be powerful. "Let's discuss tomorrow after we file our petition." I fell asleep that night with my mind still churning, but for the first time since arriving in Santa Fe, my dreams weren't filled with scenes of humiliation or abandonment. Instead, I dreamed of standing in front of a classroom again, not of children, but of women my age and older, teaching them to recognize the warning signs of exploitation that I had missed for so long. Preliminary hearing for emergency protective order and expedited eviction is set for December 18th, Gabriella announced 3 days later, ending a phone call in the conference room where we were preparing documentation. "Judge Miranda Vasquez. She's tough but fair with a strong record on elder abuse cases." "That's only 10 days away," I noted, surprised at the speed. The evidence of potential financial exploitation was compelling enough for the court to fast-track it. Plus, the attempted guardianship filing by their attorney raised red flags, especially once the court reviewed Dr. Fuentes' evaluation of your cognitive status. I nodded relief, mixing with apprehension. The legal machinery was now fully engaged, moving us inexorably toward a confrontation I both dreaded and needed. "Will I have to see Ethan and Isabella at this hearing?" I asked. "Yes," Gabriella replied gently. "They have the right to be present, and given the serious nature of these proceedings, they almost certainly will attend with their attorney. but you'll be protected. They won't be allowed to approach or speak to you directly." The thought of facing them in a courtroom made my chest tighten. The last time I had seen my son was at that disastrous Thanksgiving dinner where he had stood by silently while Isabella humiliated me. What would I see in his eyes now? Anger, calculation, any remnant of the loving boy I had raised. "You don't have to go through this alone," Gabriella reminded me. "Carmen can be there, and any other support person you choose." Javier's face flashed in my mind. He was arriving in Santa Fe tomorrow for his photography workshop. We had arranged to meet for coffee, my first social engagement that wasn't related to my legal situation or my new teaching position. "I'll have support," I assured her. That evening, while preparing a simple dinner in the casita's kitchenette, I received a call from an unknown number. Warily, I answered. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Robert Montgomery, Isabella's father." I nearly dropped the phone in surprise. "Dr. Montgomery, I'm surprised to hear from you." "I'm calling without my daughter's knowledge," he said, his voice tight. "This situation has gotten out of hand. Legal filings, elder abuse allegations. This isn't how family disagreements should be resolved." "I agree," I replied carefully. Unfortunately, being treated like a servant and having $280,000 taken from my retirement savings isn't how families should behave either. "Look, I understand there's been some misunderstanding about money." "There's no misunderstanding, Dr. Montgomery. I have bank records showing every transfer texts from Ethan promising repayment that never came, and witnesses to how I was treated in my own home. This isn't a disagreement. It's exploitation." He sighed heavily. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm a reasonable man. I'm also a doctor concerned about my daughter's health during her pregnancy. This stress isn't good for her or the baby." I felt a flash of anger. "Dr. Montgomery, your daughter isn't pregnant. The ultrasound she sent me was a stock photo from the internet with her name added to it." A long silence followed. That's a serious accusation." "It's easily verifiable. I did a reverse image search and found the original stock photo. Ask her for medical records confirming the pregnancy. Ask to accompany her to an actual ultrasound appointment." Another lengthy pause. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Even if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, surely there's a way to resolve this without courts and public allegations, for everyone's sake." "I tried for 3 years to be reasonable, Dr. Montgomery. I gave Ethan and Isabella chance after chance to treat me with basic respect and honesty. Their response was to try to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could take control of my house and remaining savings. So yes, there is a way to resolve this. They can leave my house as legally required, return a reasonable portion of the money they took under false pretenses, and stop their groundless attacks on my competency." "And if they do that, you'll drop the elder abuse petition?" he asked. "If they comply fully with those 3 conditions and sign legally binding agreements to that effect, I would consider it," I said, careful not to overcommit. "I'll talk to them," he said finally. "This isn't what I expected when I called." "What did you expect, Dr. Montgomery? That I would be a confused old woman easily intimidated into silence? That stereotype has allowed financial predators to exploit elderly parents for too long." After hanging up, I immediately called Gabriella to report the conversation. She was concerned, but not surprised. "This could be positive," Isabella's father realizing they'd been lying to him, "or it could be another manipulation tactic," she warned. "They might be testing to see if you'd accept a lesser settlement. Don't agree to anything without consulting me first." "I won't," I promised. The next afternoon, I met Javier at Pascual's, a popular cafe in downtown Santa Fe. Seeing him walk through the door, silver-haired, tall, with the same kind eyes I remembered from San Diego, brought an unexpected flutter to my stomach. "Elena," he said warmly, taking my hands in his. "You look, different. Stronger." "I feel stronger," I admitted as we sat down. Still scared, still hurt, but stronger. Over coffee and blue corn enchiladas, I updated him on the legal proceedings and the unexpected call from Isabella's father. "That's encouraging," Javier said. "If they're reaching out informally, they may be realizing their position isn't as strong as they thought." "Or they're trying another angle to manipulate me," I countered. He smiled. "The fact that you're considering that possibility shows how much you've changed. The Elena I knew in San Diego wanted so badly to believe the best of everyone, especially her son. That Elena was naive and paid dearly for it." Javier's expression sobered. "No, that Elena was loving and generous. qualities that should be honored, not exploited. The difference now is that you've added wisdom and boundaries to those qualities." His understanding touched something deep within me. Unlike others who had simply condemned Ethan and Isabella's behavior, rightfully so, Javier seemed to recognize the complexity of my feelings. The love for my son that persisted despite his betrayal. The grief for what our relationship had been and might have been. "Will you be in Santa Fe for the hearing on the 18th? I asked. "My workshop ends on the 16th, he replied. I had planned to return to San Diego then, but I could extend my stay if having me there would help. "As a witness to the Thanksgiving incident, your testimony might be important," I said, trying to keep my tone practical when what I really wanted to say was simpler. "Yes, having you there would help. Your presence gives me strength." "Then I'll stay," he said simply. "Maria can handle things at home for a few more days." After lunch, Javier walked me to my car. Before saying goodbye, he hesitated, then said, "Elena, there's something I should tell you. Miguel and I spoke about Ethan before he died." I froze. "What about Ethan?" "Miguel was concerned about how Ethan and Isabella treated you even then. Small disrespects taking advantage of your generosity. He asked me to keep an eye on you after he was gone. I tried, but after the funeral you became increasingly isolated. Isabella seemed to screen your calls, manage your social calendar. They were controlling who I saw and spoke to," I realized. "That's a classic pattern in exploitative relationships." Javier nodded. "Miguel feared something like this might happen. Not to this extent, perhaps, but he worried that Ethan had never developed the character he should have. That despite all your love and guidance, there was a fundamental selfishness in him that Isabella encouraged rather than tempered." I absorbed this painful insight, thinking again of Miguel's letter warning me to maintain my independence. Even from his deathbed, he had tried to protect me from what he suspected might come. "Thank you for telling me," I said finally. "It helps to know that Miguel saw this potential in Ethan, that it wasn't just my blindness that allowed this to happen." Javier squeezed my hand. "You were blinded by love, Elena. There's no shame in that." That evening, as I was grading the progress of my art students, my phone rang. Ethan's number. For the first time in weeks, I decided to answer. "Hello, Ethan." "Mom," his voice sounded strained. "We need to talk." "I believe our attorneys are handling communication now," I replied, keeping my voice neutral despite my racing heart. "Mom, please. This has gone too far. Elder abuse allegations. Do you have any idea what this could do to my career? To Isabella's business? I'm more concerned about what your actions have done to my financial security and emotional well-being over the past 3 years, I said. "We never meant to hurt you," he protested. "Yes, we borrowed money, but we always intended to pay it back when things improved. And yes, maybe Isabella was harsh sometimes, but she was under a lot of pressure with her business struggling. And the dirty mop at Thanksgiving telling me to eat crumbs off the floor like a dog. Was that just stress too?" He sighed. "That was inexcusable. Isabella knows she went too far. We both do. But Mom Elder abused getting the courts involved. This is going to destroy our family permanently. Ethan, you and Isabella tried to have me declared mentally incompetent to gain control of my house and finances. You faked a pregnancy to manipulate me. You systematically isolated me and treated me as an unpaid servant while taking nearly $280,000 of my retirement savings. What would you call that behavior?" A long pause followed. "We made mistakes," he finally said. "Serious ones. But we're willing to make amends. We'll move out of the house. We'll work out a repayment plan for the money, whatever we can afford. Just please drop these legal proceedings before they ruin all our lives." "I'm willing to consider a settlement," I said carefully, remembering Gabriella's warnings. "But it would need to include a formal acknowledgement of what happened, legally binding repayment terms, and immediate compliance with the eviction notice. And all communication needs to go through our attorneys." "Mom, come on. We're family. We don't need lawyers to—" "We absolutely do, Ethan. Trust has been broken in the most fundamental ways. I will not engage in direct negotiations with you or Isabella after what you've done. If you're serious about making amends, have your attorney contact Gabriela Ortiz to discuss settlement terms." His voice hardened. "You've changed, Mom." "Yes," I agreed. "I have. I've remembered who I am and what I deserve. That's what happens when you remove yourself from an abusive situation. Clarity returns." After ending the call, I sat motionless for several minutes, processing the conversation. Ethan's offer to move out and consider repayment might represent genuine remorse and a desire to make amends. Or more likely, given their pattern of behavior, it might be another manipulation tactic to avoid the legal and public consequences of their actions. Either way, something had shifted. They were no longer dictating the terms of our relationship. They were responding to boundaries I had established, actions I had taken. For the first time in this painful journey, I felt the power dynamics change. And with that change came a quiet certainty, regardless of the outcome of the hearing on December 18th, I had already reclaimed something essential: my voice, my boundaries, and my self-respect. The Santa Fe County Courthouse stood imposingly against the crystal blue December sky, its adobe walls glowing warm in the morning sunlight. I paused at the base of the steps, drawing deep breaths to calm my racing heart. Today I would face Ethan and Isabella across a courtroom. Carmen stood to my left, solid as the mountains behind us. Javier was at my right, his quiet presence a different kind of strength. Behind us waited Martha Sullivan and 4 other women from my art class. My unexpected cheering section determined to show the court that Elena Rodriguez was not isolated or alone. "Ready?" Gabriela asked, immaculate in a charcoal suit, her briefcase containing months of bank statements, text messages, emails, and sworn affidavits documenting the systematic exploitation I had experienced. I nodded, squaring my shoulders. "Ready?" The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, wood-paneled and formal. As we took our seats at the plaintiff's table, the door opened and Ethan entered with Isabella and their attorney, a sleek man in an expensive suit who exuded confidence. I kept my eyes forward, but I could feel Ethan's gaze on me. Just before the proceedings began, the courtroom door opened again, and Robert Montgomery entered, taking a seat in the back row. Isabella turned, spotted her father, and her face registered shock, followed quickly by calculation. They hadn't known he would be here. "All rise." The Honorable Judge Miranda Vasquez presiding. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a tight bun, took her seat and surveyed the courtroom. "Be seated. We're here for preliminary proceedings in the matter of Rodriguez v. Rodriguez case number CV 2023-4872, petition for emergency protective order, expedited eviction, and financial restitution based on allegations of elder abuse and financial exploitation." She looked directly at me. "Mrs. Rodriguez, are you prepared to proceed today?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez, same question." Ethan and Isabella murmured their assent. What followed was 2 hours of methodical legal presentation. Gabriela laid out our case with devastating precision, bank records showing the systematic draining of my account's text messages, proving the loans were never intended as gifts, witness statements regarding my treatment in my own home, and medical documentation proving my cognitive soundness. Isabella's face remained impassive throughout, but Ethan's expression cycled through defensiveness, anger, and, when Javier described the Thanksgiving incident in vivid detail, what appeared to be genuine shame. Their attorney, James Bennett, attempted to reframe the narrative as simple family generosity gone awry, characterizing me as a mother who had willingly supported her son and daughter-in-law only to have regrets later. He minimized the Thanksgiving incident as an isolated moment of poor judgment during a stressful event. "Your Honor," Bennett argued, "this is a family disagreement that has been regrettably escalated to legal proceedings. Mrs. Rodriguez Sr. has provided financial support to her son and daughter-in-law, as many parents do, and now wishes to recategorize these gifts as loans. As for the eviction, my clients have made substantial improvements to the property over 3 years, increasing its value significantly." Judge Vasquez's expression remained unreadable as she reviewed the documentation before her. Finally, she looked up. "Mr. Bennett, I've reviewed the text messages presented as evidence. They clearly show Mr. Rodriguez repeatedly characterizing these transfers as loans and promising repayment next month or when the commission comes in. Your argument that these were intended as gifts is not supported by the documentary evidence." She turned to Gabriela. "Ms. Ortiz, while the financial evidence is compelling, the allegations of emotional abuse and isolation are more subjective. Can you address how these factors contribute to a finding of elder abuse rather than simply a contentious family relationship?" "Your Honor, the emotional abuse and isolation worked in tandem with the financial exploitation. By gradually relegating Mrs. Rodriguez to the role of unpaid household help, denying her access to family meals and social activities, and treating her with escalating disrespect, the defendants created conditions where she felt too devalued and dependent to question the financial dynamics. This is a recognized pattern in elder exploitation cases. Judge Vasquez nodded thoughtfully, then addressed Ethan and Isabella directly. Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez, the evidence before me suggests a troubling pattern of behavior toward an elderly parent who provided both housing and significant financial support. What is your response to these specific allegations? Their attorney started to answer, but the judge held up her hand. I'd like to hear directly from the defendants. Isabella looked to her attorney in alarm, but Ethan slowly stood. Your Honor, He faltered, then continued. I can't deny the financial transactions. They happened. And we did promise to pay the money back, but our circumstances made that impossible. He swallowed hard. As for how we treated my mother, I can see now that it was wrong. At the time, I told myself we were helping her by giving her purpose company things to do. But that wasn't the truth. Isabella tugged at his sleeve, her expression panicked, but he continued. The truth is that we took advantage of her generosity and love. We treated her home as our own and her money as our entitlement. And yes, we discussed seeking guardianship when she left, but that was because we were desperate, financially and otherwise. He looked directly at me for the first time. I'm deeply ashamed, Mom. What we did was inexcusable. The courtroom fell silent. Isabella stared at Ethan in disbelief. Their attorney looked like he'd been struck. Judge Vasquez regarded Ethan for a long moment. Mr. Rodriguez, given your acknowledgement of these actions, what do you propose as a resolution? We will vacate the house immediately, Ethan said, his voice stronger now. We will agree to a structured repayment plan for the financial support we received based on our ability to pay, and we withdraw completely any challenges to my mother's competency or autonomy. Isabella finally found her voice. Your Honor, my husband doesn't speak for both of us. We've done nothing wrong legally. Mrs. Rodriguez willingly provided financial support as any mother would. Mrs. Rodriguez, the judge interrupted sharply, I've reviewed evidence including a witness statement from your own father describing a Thanksgiving dinner where you handed your mother-in-law a dirty mop and told her to eat crumbs off the floor like a dog. Do you deny this occurred? Isabella paled. My father wasn't even there that night. No, but I was, came a voice from the back of the courtroom. Robert Montgomery stood. And I provided a sworn statement based on what multiple witnesses described to me, including your friend Melissa Montgomery, who was so disturbed by your behavior that she called me the next day. Isabella sank back into her seat, speechless. Judge Vasquez surveyed the courtroom. Based on the evidence presented and the defendant's own admissions, I am granting the emergency protective order preventing any further financial transactions involving Mrs. Elena Rodriguez's accounts by the defendants. I am ordering expedited eviction with a 14-day vacancy requirement. Defendants must vacate the property at 1542 Alameda Drive, San Diego, California, by January 1, 2024. She turned to Gabriella. Regarding financial restitution, I am ordering a full accounting and settlement conference to establish a repayment plan for $250,000 of the approximately $280,000 transferred under apparent misrepresentation. This conference will occur in January after the property has been vacated. Her gaze settled on Ethan and Isabella. I strongly suggest you approach that settlement conference in the spirit of acknowledgement and restitution demonstrated by Mr. Rodriguez today. Further attempts to evade responsibility could result in additional legal consequences, including potential criminal charges for elder financial abuse. With a sharp rap of her gavel, it was over. I sat motionless, trying to absorb what had just happened. We had won on every count: the protective order, the eviction, and the framework for financial restitution. But more surprisingly, Ethan had acknowledged his wrongdoing publicly, breaking ranks with Isabella and her continuing denials. As we prepared to leave the courtroom, Ethan approached, stopping a respectful distance away when Javier and Carmen moved protectively closer to me. Mom, could we talk privately for just a moment? He asked quietly. I looked to Gabriella, who nodded. Keep it brief and in the hallway where we can see you. I followed Ethan to a quiet corner of the hallway. Up close, I could see how haggard he looked. Deep circles under his eyes, weight lost from his face, a nervous tension in his shoulders. Mom, I meant what I said in there, he began. I'm ashamed of how we treated you, of how I allowed you to be treated. There's no excuse. Why, Ethan? I asked the question that had haunted me for weeks. How could my son, the boy I raised to be kind and respectful, treat his own mother this way? He looked down, unable to meet my eyes. I've been asking myself the same question since you left. The best answer I can find is that it happened gradually. Each small disrespect that went unchallenged made the next one easier. Each financial loan that wasn't repaid normalized the idea that your money was an extension of mine. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like Miguel's that it made my heart twist. And Isabella, she brought out the worst in me, Mom. Her materialism, her status anxiety. I wanted to give her the lifestyle she demanded, and when my income couldn't do it, we turned to you. It was wrong. Deeply, unforgivably wrong. Where will you go when you leave the house? I asked. Isabella's parents have agreed to let us stay with them temporarily. After that, I don't know. He hesitated. Isabella and I are separating. This situation has made me see things more clearly, including the kind of person I became when I was with her. The news surprised me, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Their relationship had been built on materialism status and the exploitation of others. Without those elements, what remained? I don't expect forgiveness, Mom, Ethan continued. What I did goes beyond the boundaries of what any parent should have to forgive. But I want you to know that I will honor the court's rulings completely. We'll be out of the house by Christmas, not January 1st, and I'll find a way to repay what we took, even if it takes the rest of my life. I studied my son's face, searching for the manipulative patterns I had become so attuned to recognizing. But what I saw instead was something I hadn't expected: genuine remorse, and perhaps the first glimmers of the emotional growth that had been stunted for so long. Ethan, forgiveness may be possible someday, I said carefully. But trust will take much longer to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. For now, I need you to respect my boundaries and honor your legal obligations. That's the only path forward. He nodded, accepting this limited response. I understand. And Mom, I'm glad you're teaching again. Dad always said you were born to be a teacher. As he walked away to where Isabella stood fuming with their attorney, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief at the legal victory, cautious hope at Ethan's apparent awakening, and a profound sadness for all that had been lost. Carmen and Javier approached, flanking me protectively. Are you all right? Carmen asked. I think I will be, I replied. Outside the courthouse, Martha and my other supporters from the art class waited with a small celebration. Flowers, hugs, and an invitation to lunch. We need to celebrate your victory, Martha insisted. The quiche at Café Pasquale's is calling our names. I looked to Gabriella, who smiled. Go celebrate. You've earned it. We'll meet tomorrow to discuss next steps for the settlement conference, but today is for recognizing what you've accomplished. As our group walked down the courthouse steps into the bright December sunshine, I felt a weight lifting. Not completely gone, but significantly lightened. The legal battle wasn't entirely over, but the most important victory had been secured: my autonomy, my home, and the promise of financial restitution. More importantly, I had rediscovered my own strength. The Elena who had meekly accepted a servant's role in her own home, who had transferred money without question, who had swallowed humiliation rather than risk conflict, that woman was gone. In her place stood someone who recognized her own worth and demanded the respect she deserved. You know, Javier said as we walked toward the restaurant, Miguel would be incredibly proud of you today. I think he would, I agreed, but I'm more proud of myself. And that, I realized, was the most important victory of all. 6 months later, I stood in the garden behind my casita, surveying the riot of colors I had planted in the spring. Zinnias, marigolds, and hollyhocks created a tapestry of blooms against the adobe wall, their vibrant hues defying the June heat. These are coming along beautifully, Carmen observed, bringing out 2 glasses of iced tea. You've got the touch. Who would have thought I had a green thumb? I mused, accepting the cool glass gratefully. Miguel always did the gardening at our house. Perhaps you always had talents waiting to be discovered, she replied, settling into one of the painted Adirondack chairs Javier had built for my small patio. What time is your meeting with Gabriella today? 3 o'clock. She says it's good news about the San Diego house. After Ethan and Isabella had vacated the property on December 23rd, as Ethan had promised, I had hired a property management company to prepare it for rental. The house needed significant repairs. Isabella's improvements had been cosmetic at best, and they had left considerable damage either through neglect or spite. Rather than selling in a difficult market, Gabriella and my financial advisor had suggested renting the property to generate monthly income while I rebuilt my savings. The rental income combined with my teaching salary from the cultural center, now up to 4 classes per week, and my Social Security benefits had created a sustainable financial foundation. "And how's the repayment going?" Carmen asked. "Slow but steady," I replied. "Ethan's making the monthly payments like clockwork, $1,000 every month plus 10% of any commissions or bonuses." After his pharmaceutical sales job had eliminated his position in a corporate restructuring, Ethan had found work at a medical supply company, a significant step down in prestige and salary, but stable employment that allowed him to begin making restitution. Isabella, true to form, had contributed nothing to the repayment plan. After their separation became a formal divorce, she had moved to Los Angeles to restart her design business, effectively removing herself from the financial obligations. Gabriella had advised that pursuing Isabella separately would be costly and potentially fruitless, so we had focused on Ethan's commitment to repayment. At the current rate, it would take nearly 20 years to repay the $250,000 judgment. I might not live to see it completed, but the monthly payments supplemented my income meaningfully, and more importantly, they represented Ethan's ongoing acknowledgement of what had happened and his responsibility to make amends. Our relationship remained cautious and limited, monthly phone calls, occasional emails. The trust that had been shattered would take years to rebuild if it could be rebuilt at all. But there was a new honesty between us that had never existed before, a recognition of past patterns that we were both determined not to repeat. "And what about you and Javier?" Carmen asked with studied casualness, sipping her tea. "He's been spending a lot of time in Santa Fe for someone who lives in San Diego." I felt a blush rise to my cheeks. "Javier is a good friend." Carmen hummed skeptically. "A good friend who drives 6 hours each way twice a month to bring you rare art supplies and take you to dinner." Javier had indeed become a regular presence in my new life, his photography workshops in Santa Fe providing convenient excuses for extended visits. We had fallen into an easy companionship, exploring the museums and galleries of Santa Fe, hiking the gentle trails in the nearby mountains, and spending long evenings in conversation on my patio. "We're taking things slowly," I admitted. "We both have full lives in different cities, and after everything that happened with Ethan and Isabella, I'm cautious about any relationship that might compromise my independence." Carmen nodded understandingly. "Independence doesn't have to mean isolation, Prima. There's a difference between healthy interdependence and the exploitation you experienced." "I know," I said softly. "Javier understands that too. He respects my boundaries, my need for my own space and financial separation. That's why it works." Later that afternoon in Gabriella's office, I received the news that would mark the final chapter in my financial recovery. "The house has appreciated significantly despite the soft market," Gabriella explained, showing me the property assessment. "Your long-term tenant's lease expires in 3 months, and my recommendation is to sell at that point. Based on comparable properties in the neighborhood, you should clear about $1.4 million after all expenses and taxes." I stared at the number in disbelief. That much San Diego real estate remains valuable even in a challenging market, and the improvements you've made with the rental income have increased the property's value considerably. The implications washed over me. With that kind of capital properly invested, I could secure my financial future completely. I could remain in Santa Fe in my simple but satisfying life, teaching my art classes, tending my garden, building my new community of friends, and exploring my cautious but promising relationship with Javier, all without financial anxiety shadowing my golden years. "It feels like closure," I said finally. Gabriella smiled. "It is closure, Elena. You've come full circle, from financial exploitation to complete financial recovery and independence. It's the outcome we hoped for, but couldn't guarantee when you first walked into my office 9 months ago." As I drove home from Gabriella's office, I took a detour to the overlook on Museum Hill parking to watch the sunset paint the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in shades of pink and gold. The beauty of this landscape still took my breath away, even after months of living here. My phone buzzed with a text from Martha Art Class Potluck still on for Friday. "I'm bringing my famous enchiladas. Susan wants to know if she can bring her new gentleman friend." I smiled, typing back, "Absolutely, tell Susan, all gentleman friends welcome. I'll provide the sangria." Another text appeared, this one from Javier. "Just checked into Hotel Santa Fe. Dinner tonight, I have news about a photography exhibition that might interest you. My smile widened as I replied, dinner sounds wonderful. My place at 7, I have news to share too. The final text came from Ethan, monthly payment sent today. Also wanted to share. I've been accepted to a counseling program specializing in family relationships and financial ethics. It's something I should have done years ago. Hope you're well, Mom. I sat with that message for a long moment before responding. I'm proud of you for taking that step, Ethan. It shows real commitment to change. I'm doing very well here. Teaching, making friends, even growing a garden. We'll talk soon. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert landscape, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From the depths of exploitation and humiliation to this moment of peace, security, and cautious joy, it had been a rebirth in every sense. Miguel had been right in his final letter to me, leave Elena. Travel to Barcelona like we always planned. Take those painting classes. Make new friends. Find joy again. I hadn't made it to Barcelona yet, but it was now a real possibility for the future. The painting classes had become my livelihood and passion. New friends surrounded me, genuine connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation or exploitation. And joy. Yes, joy had returned to my life in unexpected ways, in the satisfaction of helping my students discover their artistic abilities, in the simple pleasure of tending my small garden, in the warmth of belonging to a community of women who valued my experience and wisdom, in the gentle evolution of my relationship with Javier, built on a foundation of respect, independence, and shared experiences. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared in the clear desert sky, I started my car and headed home, not to the house in San Diego that had become a prison of obligation, but to my small casita with its bright garden and simple comforts. To the life I had built for myself, piece by piece, after having the courage to walk away from abuse. The final words I had written in my journal that morning seemed especially fitting now, as I drove through the gathering darkness toward the lights of home. To any woman reading this who recognizes herself in my story, it's never too late to reclaim your dignity. It's never too late to say no more. It's never too late to remember who you are and what you deserve. The road to recovery is long and sometimes painful, but on the other side lies a freedom you may have forgotten was possible. I am Elena Alvarez Rodriguez. I am 66 years old. I am a teacher, an artist, a friend, a mother who loves her son but no longer enables his worst behaviors. I am financially independent. I am respected. I am valued for who I am, not what I can provide. Most importantly, I am no longer invisible, not to others, and never again to myself.